Well, I think Brexit definitely helped make that decision. And I have been told, and not that I know this from experience, but by many clients, like I've recently had an international a call with a gentleman from in France, from Paris, who was looking for some help here in Canada. And one of the things he said to me really struck me interesting was that Canadian culture is easier for European to embed into than American culture. I don't know that I would have known that. I mean, when he said it, I thought, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But I thought that was an interesting observation that he had. So I would say that we're an easier entry point than, for instance, if you were looking into the U.S. at this point. So Canada's a big country and lots going on. So yeah, I think it was seen as an opportunity and an easier point of entry. Yeah, I can't really speak too much for the UK, probably no more than what you would say, because we know the UK's media can be pretty tough and aggressive. And Canadians tend to be far more polite, and the media a little bit more respectful. Like, not quite as in your face as I would suggest the UK is, but I am speaking anecdotally there. I don't know, because their strength is there, and we've been working together since July, so it's not like I've spent tons of time over there understanding what that environment is like, but that's my sense. And you know what, we get a lot of calls on crisis, in particular pre-crisis, like somebody who's had something gone sideways and is anticipating what could go wrong and just quickly wanting to seek advice or check in, and we do that, like, and we'll huddle around with them and kind of brainstorm where we're at. And we just do that, like, we don't charge for that, like, and it's a tough one, right? Because if someone's in crisis, that's not the time to swing out a $5,000 project fee. I mean, should we need to activate that, we will definitely have to charge for that. But there's a lot of times we get people who say, well, this just happened, and companies, or we're anticipating this could really go off the rails and we need to talk to somebody. We'll have that conversation, and and lots of times it's, you know what, I think you're doing the right thing. Stay the course, and if this blossoms, if this changes in any way, then call us back and we'll start. It's, sometimes you don't want to fuel the fire of what could happen and be too defensive in the beginning. So, but yeah, I'd say I feel like we're on the rise on that one, and I don't know whether it's our own web advertising, which is entirely possible, or yeah. We've had a fair few in the last little while of people, and it's typically that they call us and say, here's what's happening, I'm super freaked out, what do you think? And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about this. Okay, no, everything you're doing is right, don't overreact, give them some advice, and say, call us back if the next piece that you're fearing does in fact happen, and we'll be in there to manage your stuff for you. So yeah, crisis is an interesting one. We have formidable competition in Canada and in BC for sure. And I want to say it's a pretty friendly space. Like, it's not unlike us to draw in another partner at another company if we're bumping into capacity issues, or if we have a client who needs something really specialized that we feel like we can't really do that client justice, we'll loop in with another client. In fact, we're working with a company out of Toronto who's a big PR firm, and they're working on a very large bid for a piece of business in Costa Rica, and it's actually looking after the tourism for Costa Rica. So, and we have a lot of experience in Costa Rica, not working with the country, but working with a chain of hotels. So they have capacity issues, so now we're co-bidding on this business. So I think that's a really interesting point of difference. And I don't ever get the sense that it's super cutthroat, but it could be just me. Maybe I'm underexposed. Maybe it's just the way we do business. But sometimes we'll get clients that we can't take on for capacity reasons, and I will kick open the door and say, hey, like, that's our thing. We don't ever say to the client, sorry, we can't help you. We're not your person. We say, we can't help you with this, but give these people a call. Like, try, and we are reciprocal on that. Like, we receive that too. And my case in point with the Costa Rica bid. Like, for instance, if I go back to tourism, we represent countries. So, and this, because it's in the context of your classroom, it's under the cone of silence. But like one of the countries that we would represent is Jordan, for instance. And I actually work on that account. And there aren't barriers, but there's cultural differences that are fascinating and change the way we do business. And that's part of what we do. So, you know, it's probably not what you think. I mean, doing business in Jordan is very similar, but you know, like here, if someone sends you an email, you answer them right away. But typically in a business setting, it's like, you know, 24 hours is the longest you go. In Jordan, that's not culturally the case. Like and there can be several emails. It makes me look good, actually, how many times you have to reach out to get an answer from a client in Jordan. And, you know, there's some extra formalities. Like I would say here to a client, you know, just in an email, or if I picked up the phone, hey, how's it going? You know, this is like common speak, but there it's a lot more formal. You know, it's dear, you know, so-and-so in the email. It's a little bit more formal. So yeah, there's some cultural differences for sure, but I don't see them as barriers. Like we knock into things like if we're working with Costa Rica, we can't work with Ecuador, which was another opportunity that we had. So those would be a barrier because we have conflicts of interest, so we can't. But geographically, it just means that we travel a lot. It means, you know, but I don't see that as a barrier either. It's just factored into the way, you know, how many clients can we take that are that far away and given the travel that we need to do. Sometimes with French, I represent, as I mentioned, Jordan and selling Jordan to Canadians, for instance. And so recently did a trade show late last year in Montreal, and didn't even think like that was going to be an issue. But it was. Like I needed someone who spoke French there with me. And I mean, I'm Canadian. Like I used to live in Montreal, like when I was a little girl. So I didn't even anticipate that to be the barrier. It was, and it was. So I'll know next time that I've got to have someone in the booth with me, because I couldn't believe how many people were francophones or just would not speak to me in English. So that I'd say Quebec. Sue in our Toronto office does speak French, so you know, typically we would move a lot of that stuff in her direction then. Until we build capacity, and you know, having French and Spanish speaking folks on our team makes good sense given of our client base. But that might be a barrier or a concern. But it's, again, like barrier to me sounds like we can't get past it, but I'd say it's definitely unique. We represent the Indigenous Association, Tourism Association of Canada, so they're one of our clients. So we're interfacing with them pretty much on a daily basis in terms of our work with them. They're a treasured client that we've had for a long time. So we just we were co-sponsor and co-show putter honor for the Impact Conference that was here in January, and we had a big hand in making sure that the Indigenous programming was correct and properly supported by the right people, and we're constantly in that. Like that's a day-to-day thing in our lives. Like we have so many clients in that area. I mean, we also, one of our big clients is Destination Canada, and so that's a natural overlay with the Indigenous population. So yeah, I'd say that's pretty seamless for us. Not that I'm aware of, but we're dealing, like the clients that we're dealing with are in tourism, and you know, we're working with, like, for instance, Keith Henry, who's the CEO of that association and so on. So culturally, I don't think we've had any, I'm not aware of there being any cultural issues. I mean, we're not grassroots with the Indigenous population. We work with their associations on a business to business level. So I'm not sure. Yeah, we haven't had any cultural issues at all.